But he didn't show up in the earthquake, and he didn't show up in the wind. Remember where he showed up? He showed up in the stillness and the silence and the quiet. And particularly in tumultuous days, my friends, it is hard to find quiet. It is hard to find stillness because when things are rocky, we kind of want to distract ourselves. I'll speak for myself. I kind of want to distract myself because if I'm still and quiet, I might pay attention to what's actually happening. And that's kind of scary. But God showed up for Elijah in the quiet, and he called him. He called him to go and to appoint his successor. Now, Elisha, at this point in the story, is a farmer, a well-to-do farmer. In the language of that time, to say that someone had 12 oxen meant to say that they were well established, that they had made it, that they were a person of substance in the community, the next prophet. You know, in church life, we're going to ask somebody to be on the vestry. We talk to people and say, who do you think would be a good vestry person? And we go to them and say, we think that you might have the gifts to be on the vestry. Would you prayerfully consider this? And the person thinks about it and prays about it. And sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they say no. But there's no mantle involved. If we're asking somebody to be on the altar guild or to teach Sunday night Bible school or to sing in the choir, we look at the gifts that they have and we invite them, or we put out an announcement and says, do you think you might be being called to this? Again, no mantle involved. In this Old Testament story, we see Elisha doing his work and Elijah coming back and putting a mantle on him, throwing a mantle over him, in the custom of saying, you have been called to be the new prophet. And he takes that up. And he says, okay. And then he demonstrates in the most dramatic way, not leaving things behind like saying, okay, well, I'll go do this, but if it doesn't work out, I'm coming back to my nice life. He literally burns it down. He takes his symbol of wealth and establishment and kills his oxen. He takes his plow, his tool for his livelihood, and breaks it apart and builds a fire. He burns it. And then he takes the oxen and cooks them and feeds a multitude. And then he says, okay, let's go. Oh, beloveds, I long for that kind of courage. I long for that kind of clarity. I long for that kind of just ability to be able to say yes to God. And the good news is God gives us stories and gives us communities and gives us opportunities so that we can long for it and live into it in wherever we are. As our song that we sang before the gospel reading says, will you love the you in you? The you in you is who God is calling, just like God called Elisha in this story. And then, in case the point hasn't been made well enough, we see in the gospel story of Jesus setting his face towards Jerusalem. You've heard me say here many, many times that setting his face towards Jerusalem is Jesus turning towards the cross. The cross, the crucifixion, and the resurrection. Grief and suffering in one hand, immeasurable hope and life in the other. And in the Christian story, beloveds, they go together. They go hand in hand. There is no resurrection without a crucifixion. And the crucifixion is meaningless without the resurrection. And so they go together. And so in this story, Jesus sets his face towards Jerusalem. He is leaving, not leaving completely, but he is turning to direct his ministry of healing and teaching and loving and casting out demons and feeding and including all the things that he's been doing, he does facing Jerusalem, heading towards the cross, knowing that the resurrection comes on the other side of the crucifixion. And because he's winsome, and because his story is attractive, and because in the miraculous way of God being God, he calls people to himself. There are people who want to go with him. And 3 people. One says, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus reminds him, actually, I go everywhere. Foxes have holes, but I don't even have a place to lay my head. You want to go with me to the Ritz? We're not going to the Ritz. We're going to just go, and we'll find hospitality where we find it. Is that what you want to do? And then another says, I want to follow you, but first I want to bury my father. And another says, I want to follow you, but I need to say goodbye to my family. And then Jesus answers with an urgency that feels so sharp to our ears. Jesus answers with the urgency, and he says, and I wonder what his tone was. Let the dead bury their own dead. No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. What? This is Jesus who grew up in the culture that values family above all. This is Jesus who grew up in the culture that you know who you are because of whose family you're in. The names, the very names themselves in this culture are son of, and your very name carries the name of your lineage.